Now, text is a specific type of animal. It's acts different than other objects in Photoshop. In order to be able to edit it or treat it as text, we need to keep it as text, but we cannot paint on it. We cannot apply filters to it as text. So what we need to be, if we want to apply filters to it, if we want to paint on it, then what we need to do is we need to rasterize it. And the way that we would rasterize it is we would just select it and go back up to that layer and rasterize like we were looking at before. So rasterize type or all of it. That again would make it so it's not actually type anymore. So at that point we couldn't go in and do the changing the font or adjusting the kerning, that sort of thing. It would be an image part of our Photoshop file. Now there are some effects that we can apply to it without having to rasterize it. One thing we have up here is called the warp tool. When I'm typing, when I'm in the middle of editing my text, right up here in the control panel, it's a T with kind of a curve underneath it. This allows me to apply different warp styles to it, where, for example, I can arc it, or I can bulge it, or turn it into a flag. Now, I need to be careful because this does distort the text, so it can affect reading. In programs like Illustrator, you can do this by typing on a path, which keeps it from distorting it, but in certain cases, this is a really good technique for getting a shape to our text that we may want. So that's the warp text tool. Another thing I can do with text, let's go ahead and make this text quite a bit bigger so we can see it better. Another thing I can do with text is I can give the text different layer styles. So I can double click on my text layer and I can go down to my effects and I can bevel the text. I can give it a stroke, give it a shadow, color overlays, things like that. So let's go and bevel and emboss this. And you can see that I have, let's give it a little more depth and a bit more size. And let's go ahead and give it a little bit of a drop shadow. And I've got adjustments for the angle of the shadow, adjustments for the size of the shadow, but that's good enough. And so I was able to apply that to it. So again, those are layer styles. They're not the same thing as putting a filter on it. In order to do a filter, I would have had to rasterize it, but I can apply layer styles to it and keep it as text for editing. Now, one very cool thing that I can do in Photoshop that can be very useful is there's a really great way to check for contrast. See, a lot of times when we're making text, let's go ahead and put that there, and I'm going to add a new layer. And I'm going to make this layer in the background, and I am going to make this layer, let's bring it down below the text. I'm going to make this layer my brick wall, okay? So here I have this brick wall and I have this text over the top of it. Now sometimes it's hard to tell how much contrast there is when you're dealing with color. So a really good way to tell if this is going to look good as far as contrast, if this is going to be readable, is to convert the image to black and white. So what I'm going to do is I am going to apply a black and white filter. And now I can see that there's really not that much contrast. It would be better. I've got some good contrast from the shadow, but the color of that wall doesn't vary too much from the color of the type. So I'm going to hide that, and I'm going to go into my text, and I'm going to make this significantly darker. Now, if I go and reapply that, I can see there's quite a bit more contrast. The bevel's kind of taken away from it because of the light parts of it, but it's better than it was before. So that's a good trick for testing your contrast with your text against your background, is look at it in grayscale, look at it in black and white, and that'll help you to know whether you need to make some changes to the color. Now, one other thing that I can do, a good trick with text, let's go ahead and get rid of these effects, and let's get rid of this background layer here. Or actually, let's leave the background layer. We're going to use it. So I'm going to go ahead and just hide these elements that I'm not working with right now. And I'm going to move the text under the background. And I can come here and I can go to my brick layer and then command click on my text layer. So you can see that that allowed me to make a selection out of my text. So command click on a PC or on a Mac, control click on a Windows computer, and you can see I have a selection going now of my text. Again, what I did was just went to my brick layer and then command clicked or control clicked on the text layer to get that. And now I can apply a mask. And you can see that that allows me to put texture in my text, basically right with the texture. So again, just do the selection by command clicking and then give it a layer mask, and you can put texture within your text. So a lot of fun things we can do with text in this way, things like textures and different effects. But if we're working with large amounts of text, generally not the best program for doing that, but they have put some good features in there for the times when you need to.